Welcome to So-and-So, brought to you by Bernina, made to create. I'm Meg Goodman, and you're about to enjoy a casual conversation with a special member of the sewist and quilting community. A conversation about how they got started, what inspires them, what excites them, and their connection to this community. Our guest today is Cristina Arcenegui Bono. She has no formal artistic training and yet has created stunning pieces of quilt art. Cristina began quilting in 1999 after watching the movie How to Make an American Quilt. Her initial background is in travel and tourism, but today her true passion is quilting, especially by machine, either on her long arm or her domestic sewing machine. She's lived almost her whole life in Spain, although her years living in London made a big impact on her. She used to go to haberdashery shops in town and fell in love with textile art. She bought her first long-arm quilting machine in 2005 and started her own machine quilting business 6 months later. After years learning from other artists, she's developed her own style. Her signature quilts are pictorial whole cloths. She reflects her love for vintage children's books in her own quilts. She teaches machine quilting workshops as well as dyeing fabrics. Cristina has exhibited in AQS shows, in the Houston Quilt Festival, Minnesota Quilt Show, PIQF, and MQX New England. She now lives near Sevilla in Andalusia, Spain, with her boyfriend, her son, and 3 cats. Hello, Cristina, and welcome to So-and-So.
Hello, Meg. Thank you very much for inviting me. It is quite an honor for me to be part of this. I would also like to thank Linda Dyer for making this possible.
Linda introduced us. Linda is our one of our So-and-So episodes. I believe she is episode 78. And she made the introduction, and I'm grateful for that as well, Cristina. Thank you for mentioning that. I'd like to start right off the bat and ask you how you learned to sew and what were some of your earliest creations?
I I cannot say that I have ever learned to sew. Well, when I was a child, I used to make clothes, if you can say that, for my dolls. But they were not properly, they were not proper clothes. But I enjoyed very much doing that by hand. But I was also allowed to use my grandmother's frizzle machine, which I loved very much.
Now, tell us about growing up and where your creative interests were focused as a child.
Well, I grew up with my aunt and grandmother, and I was surrounded by cousins. I have um, 15 cousins from my mother and 25 from my father.
So you have a total of 40 cousins.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
I have a strong sense of belonging to my family, and I think a lot of who I am is due to that sense of community.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be who I am without my family, really. So my aunt Maria passed on her love for music, art, and handmade things to me. She was my first English teacher, and she loved everything about um, the English language, the British culture, and anything to do with England.
Mm-hmm.
So, and apart from that, I grew up surrounded by books and comics. In fact, well, my family and friends called me, I think you say, bookworm. So,
Bookworm. Okay,
yes.
sure.
So I devoured the books by Enid Blyton, Jules Verne, and many others. In fact, I studied library and information science at the University of Granada. So as a child, I was always thinking about new games for my cousins, and I loved to paint. But to be honest with you, I stopped painting when I became a teenager. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I took up this hobby again.
You were saying that you were studying at the University of Granada,
Yeah.
but originally you were in the travel and tourism field. Tell us about that.
Well, I studied library, but then in 1994, I went to live in England because I wanted to improve my English. So when I moved to London, my English was so poor that the only kind of jobs that I could do were handmade, no, chambermaid, or kitchen porter.
Hmm.
So I started working at a Hilton hotel near Hyde Park, and I quickly fell in love with working in tourism and hotels. And this is the thing. I was a bit frustrated, thinking I could do, I would like to work in other departments of the hotel, but although I have the training, I don't have my English is not proficient. So I was told you need to to study. You need to do some kind of studies here in London in travel and tourism in order to get a good job. So that's how I studied travel and tourism in London, because I thought, well, there are so many jobs here in London, and there are so many opportunities to grow and develop a career that that's what I did. So as soon as I finished my studies in travel and tourism, I started working for travel agencies and tour operators, and I was hooked really on tourism.
Hmm. And you've talked about your time in London, saying it had a big impact on you and your creativity. And you also used to go to haberdashery shops in town, and you fell in love with textile art. Tell us about this.
Well, let me tell you, the first thing I did when I moved to London, I arrived in London on a Saturday evening, and the first thing I did on Sunday morning was to go to the British Museum. I was dying to go to the Assyrian and Egyptian and Greek sections of the museums. I wanted to see in person all those. I had previously studied history of art, and I wanted to see the Parthenon sculptures, the Assyrian murals, and so on. So at that time, I didn't know that was going to have um, that was how do I say it? That was going to have a big impact in me, seeing all that beauty, and also being able to go to the National Portrait Gallery, to see the castles, the palaces, all that beauty. It's in my head. So when I create, I'm not thinking about the Parthenon, but in some way, I cannot tell you why, but it did. It did. So as far as haberdashery shops is concerned, one of the second Christmas that I lived in London, I was very sick, so I had to go to the supermarket to get some groceries. When I was waiting to pay, um, I saw a cross stitch kit, and I thought, well, I could do this in my bed. So I became addicted to cross stitch,
Aha.
and as and um, when I did that, I looked for haberdashery shops in London, and it was a whole new world. It had nothing to do with what I had seen in Spain before, and I was told you have to go to Liberty. Liberty is an department store from the 15th century, and they have a whole floor just for haberdashery. And I used to go to Liberty every Saturday. So I loved haberdashery shops in London, especially Liberty.
How old were you when you lived in London?
I moved when I was 26, and I came back when I was 30.
What an adventure.
Yes, very much, very much.
Now, I love this next story. You became interested in patchwork a few years ago when you saw the movie Where Love Lies: How to Make an American Quilt. But you didn't decide to make your first quilt until you became pregnant with your son, and he is now 24.
Yes.
So, first of all, what was it about that movie that ignited your interest in quilting?
Well, I was living in London at that time, and and I wanted to learn how to make a quilt, but I didn't know where to go. So it wasn't until I moved back to Spain where when I was able to go to patchwork classes. But what really attracted me from that movie is that that group of women gathering together every week. So they had been doing that for years and years. So they knew each other. They knew their stories, what they have been going through. So each one of them made a blog for a quilt that they were doing for one of for Winona Ryder, and so that each blog represented a story. So to be able to express yourself with fabrics, um, got me hooked on that. And also, being able to have a group of friends that gathered together and made something for someone. That was really got me into patchwork. The sense of community and to be able to create with fabrics.
Do you still have that community around you today?
Well, I have it, but online.
Uh-huh. And that's the beauty of technology and the things that we've gone through is now our communities can be worldwide.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I have a friend in the north of Spain that we talk almost every day from Monday to Friday, and we encourage each other. For instance, there is a quilt contest in the north of Spain every year in March, and she has entered quilt in that contest, and I've encouraged her the last month because she was like, "Oh, I'm not going to finish this or that," and I said, "No, no." So and the sense, the same is the opposite way. If I am like, "Oh no, no, no," why have I said yes to this or that? It's yes because you like it.
Hmm.
So the same with other friends that we encourage each other in good and bad times.
Yeah, I know community is a foundation of this podcast and universal with um, all quilters. Now, what I find interesting, Christina, is your works are striking, and those joining us today, I encourage you to go to Christina's website. We'll give you that website address at the end of this podcast. But they are remarkable, and you make many of these for the sole purpose of submitting them to contests. And your intention was to make your way into the North American market as you saw these competitions as a really good passport to make yourself known. So, would you tell us a story of one of these competitions, the quilt you made for it, and why it was so meaningful?
Well, although I had previously entered quilts in quilt contests in North America, my very first was in one called My Little Enchanted Compass. And I entered that quilt into the American Quilt Society festivals in Lancaster and Paducah. So the first thing is that when that was accepted, I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And then in Lancaster, I won first place in the first time entrant category. I was like, "Are you kidding me?"
Hmm.
Well, I loved that quilt. That quilt is based on an illustration from the Scottish artist Johanna Basford. She's probably one of the best selling coloring books authors. And I obviously asked her for permission in writing. This is very important that, no matter if you see something, well, I got her illustration because I bought her coloring books, but even if you buy the coloring book, that doesn't mean that you can use that coloring page. So I asked her for permission, and she said, "Well, as long as you don't make hundreds of quilts like that,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I said, no way, there is no way I can do not hundreds. I mean, more than one. It takes me months really to make one of those. So to me, winning the first place in Lancaster was like, wow, my my work, people like my work. So it was like, how do you say, when someone tells you you are doing okay. It is, we like it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a recognition. To be honest with you, really, really, winning an award in the US is a big recognition because the competition is so hard that it's like, oh, my work, is good enough to be in a quilt contest in the US. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that almost every quilter around the world wants to win an award in the US.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of, oh, she's you know she's she's won it in Lancaster, Paducah, or wherever. So
So you're the best of the best when you win here.
yes, that's right. That's right.
That makes sense. Now, you were saying that it takes you a while to finish one of your quilts, and I've heard you say that sometimes 6 months to finish them. And you mentioned Johanna Basford. You also base them on illustrations of Daria Song, Rita Berman, Sveta Dorosheva, many others. And you focus on illustrations that reflect the children's universe. Now, this is interesting. Their favorite themes, and you said that they already have all the points to become a tapestry, but they must be drawings that speak of a real childhood of curious children who get dirty, play, and discover, not those that reflect nerdy stories. Tell us more about that.
Um, well, especially my children well, based on the work of the great Ukrainian artist Sveta Dorosheva. Um, Although it is her, it is her work, her ideas. I found that Sveta reflect like no one else that I've known so far. The way I see children, the way I see my childhood. I mean, although I remember myself as someone naive and a confident child, I also remember myself being naughty or mischievous. So I remember, getting dirty in the floor because I loved drawing and I loved laying on the floor and using my coloring pencils. So when I look at the my polka dot girl, I see myself like that because I think that almost any girl can relate to that to that being told no, 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 that that dress is clean,
Mm-hmm.
or girls don't do that, girls don't lay on the floor. At least, well, I was born in 1968, and the way I was raised is that there are many things that girl shouldn't do. Or for instance, the two girls reading an erotic novel. Some people have told me, well, I think that that will is kind of it's kind of dirty, and I said, why? Because you are saying that children, you are portraying two girls reading an erotic novel. And I always say, so do you think that children don't look for prohibited, forbidden things like that? I was told when I was a child, don't take that book, don't look at this or don't look at that. And as soon as you tell a child not to do something, the next thing they do is to do it.
Indeed. It's encouragement.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, it's like forbidden. Yes,
Uh-huh. I'm going for it.
yes. So I love children that do I love portraying children that do things that they have been told not to.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because those children also exist. I mean, you know, children do beautiful things, but they are also naughty because they are discovering the world. And this is why um, I love portraying children in my quilt, because they are so curious. They want to discover the world. They have no filters. And so this is why I love children.
So your quilts are authentic, about authentic childhoods.
I think so.
I want to talk about your signature quilts. They are pictorial whole cloths. Would you tell us what those are and describe your style for us?
Well, a whole cloth quilt. It's a type of quilt that the quilter use only a single solid piece of fabric for the top,
Mm-hmm.
rather than being pieced. When we talk, so basically, a whole cloth is not patchwork, because patchwork means work of patches.
Mm-hmm.
So there are no patches. It's one piece of fabric. So it's all about the quilting, either by machine or by hand. And as you mentioned, I do pictorial quilts, and I do mainly things. I tend to, my intention, my purpose is to awaken sensations and feelings in the viewer. So let me tell you something. When I am in an exhibition, when I exhibit, I love being in front of my quilt and listen to people talking about the quilt. And sometimes what I do is that I am at a certain distance, so people don't know that I am the quilter.
Interesting.
So
Mm-hmm.
it is kind of interesting uh, listening to people's thoughts. And I remember in Houston in 2019, when I exhibited my quilt, that is two girls reading an erotic novel. We have several groups of scholars, of children that I suppose that were in the primary school. And I remember them talking about the quilt. As I said, they have no filters, so they were curious, and I learned a lot about how they see what they were seeing, because they were curious about what are they reading, why,
Mm-hmm.
and so on. Um, so as I said, so pictorial. So basically, I do scenes. I do pictorial because I want to represent a scene. I want you to think what would you do? Like, for instance, Harmony. Harmony is the polka dot girl. It's a girl that is writing, and she's laying on the floor. And so when people look at that, some people think, oh, it could be me writing a diary, or it could be me doing something for school. Um, so my intention, my purpose is for you to look at the quilt and think about your own childhood.
Mm-hmm. So you evoke emotion, curiosity. That must be fun,
Yes,
kind of doing incognito, listening to people experience what you've created. How does that feel? What's that like?
it's very, very exciting, really.
Mm-hmm.
It's well, sometimes you might hear something you don't want to hear, and but most of the time, people think, "Oh, I had a polka dot, dress," or I remember when I was a child, jumping in a swimming pool or even in a river. So people smile when they see the quilts,
Sure.
and it's, as I said, it's very, very interesting to hear people's comments.
Now you were talking about your whole cloth. You've also done patchwork, and you've commented that patchwork at the beginning of the century in Spain was something that very few people practiced. So you took every chance to get into intensive courses whenever any teacher came to your town. Why do you think it wasn't very popular?
Well, let me tell you, the Spanish Patchwork Association was born in 1998 and was founded by quilters that who had lived in the US and France. So they were the ones that really brought patchwork to Spain. But to be honest with you, really, if you investigate, if you do some research, you will find out that there has been patchwork all over the world for centuries because people will always need to warm themselves. So how do they do that? By using scraps of fabric, scraps of used clothes to make blankets. So in Spain, people have been doing that for centuries. But patchwork, the way we do it now is fairly recent because when our grandmothers did those quilts, they didn't think that they were doing something artistic. They thought that they were doing something to warm the family. Um, so we have a fairly young association because we are also a small country. And but since I would say since the beginning of the 21st century is quite popular because at the beginning of the century, most people were doing cross stitch like me,
Mm-hmm.
and we moved to patchwork because at some point you think, I cannot make any more cross stitch.
Enough.
Well, the house is full of cross stitch, so I have to do something else. And then you discover patchwork, and many people like me did their first quilt when they got pregnant, like me in 1999.
Mm-hmm.
Or some people made the first quilt for their grandchild. It's like, oh, I can do something for my future son,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of something that you will treasure forever.
Sure.
Your first quilt for your first child.
Well, in 2005, you opened your machine quilting business. So tell us about this and how's it going?
Well, I bought my first long arm quilting machine in 2005, as you said, and although when I started, I was alone. My boyfriend quickly joined me, and so he started working with me part time. And in 2011, he decided to leave his job and started working with me full time. So we quilt full time now, the both of us. Although I don't quilt full time anymore because I also teach both online and um, and in person in the US. And but the business has been very successful. And when I thought about starting a long quilting business, it's because I heard about a quilter in the north of Spain who quilted for others, and she did it from home. And I thought, wow, I could do this from home. I have enough space to accommodate a long arm quilting machine, and that would give me the chance to take care of my son because at that time
Mm-hmm.
I was working outside home, and it was I had to take my son to doctor appointments, to take him to school and things like that, and I was like, I cannot do both things, and I cannot take care of my son properly. So that was me the perfect chance to keep working and also to take care of my son.
Now, you mentioned that you teach online and in person, and you're coming to the US pretty soon too. Would you tell us about your teaching?
I shouldn't say this, but the pandemic opened a whole new world or market to me,
Mm-hmm.
because thanks to the lockdown, I started teaching online. Up until then, uh, I had taught in Spain in person. But when the lockdown came, I started receiving offers to teach to guilds um, from the US. Guilds that obviously couldn't afford me, to pay me traveling expenses from Spain. But thanks to the pandemic, they changed. They used to bring teachers from all over the US to teach, to give them workshops. But with the pandemic, they changed to virtual. So as I said, the pandemic opened a whole new world, and I started teaching online. Like last month, that I taught at the virtual school fest from Mancuso, and I also taught two guilds, one in California and the other one in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
So that's quite, and as I'm also teaching at the end of the month. And in April, I'm going to the New England Quilt Expo in Manchester, New Hampshire. I'm teaching 4 workshops and a lecture, and I'm also teaching at 2 guilds in New York State. So really, really teaching is my passion.
Mm-hmm.
I can say that. I love when people, when people start the day, they think, oh, no, 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 I have never drawn or I have never free motion quilted. And at the end of the day, they tell me, I can do it. I can do it. And, that means a lot to me. That means that they are not afraid anymore. So
Cristina, what inspires you?
my cousins.
All 40 of them.
Not all of them, but my childhood. It seems like I'm always talking about my childhood, but let me tell you something. I live and I have the business where I used to live with my parents and my aunt and my cousins. But in front of my home, my other cousins lived. So we were 9 girls playing all day in the street because our street is pedestrian.
Mm-hmm.
So, so when I think about my childhood, I think about my grandmother, my aunt, but I also think about those girls that that meant the world to me. I remember us watching Little Women every Christmas, and we invented all kinds of dialogue and things like that. And in some way, I'm honoring them. I'm honoring those days
Mm-hmm.
um, because it's really, really an inspiration to me. How we loved each other, how we cared for each other, and it's really, really what inspires me. And also my travels. For instance, I went to New England last June, and I went to Vermont, New Hampshire, Connecticut, and Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw a hummingbird for the first time in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and I also saw a zebra in Vermont. A zebra! Can you
Uh-huh.
believe it? A zebra! And so traveling means that well, especially if I go to the U.S., I stay with friends in Vermont, Massachusetts, and so I hear their stories. I see their quilts and their sewing rooms, and I'm like sponge.
Mm-hmm.
So they are inspiration, really. The traveling. And let me tell you something. Well, in 2022, I went to teach at the Pacific International Quilt Festival in Santa Clara, California. Um, so 2 weeks after that, I have to teach at Houston Quilt Festival. So instead of going back to Spain and then going back to Houston, I stayed with a friend in San Francisco. And what I did is that instead of flying from San Francisco to Houston, I took a
Oh
train. I
my.
went by train from San Francisco to Houston. Believe me, it is, I can say that it is the trip of my life. I was able to talk to people. I was able to see the sunset in Arizona. I don't know where, but it was Arizona. So I'm reflecting that on my quilts at the moment, on my pieced quilt, improvisational quilt, those colors, and those conversations. So traveling is so inspiring to me. Not only the places, but the people that I've met in my trips.
So with all of this that you've done, what's next for you? What's your dream?
My realistic dream. All right. Well, my realistic dream is to get published. I would like to get published in a magazine. And if you ask me, and why haven't you published? Because there are only 24 hours in the day.
Indeed.
And my realistic dream is to teach in Korea and Japan. I say unrealistic because it's I tried, but it is kind of difficult. It's I don't know how to do it, but I will keep trying.
I believe it will happen. After all we've learned from you, I think that's a realistic dream. Why Korea and Japan? Why there?
I adore Japanese patchwork and Korean patchwork, and well, to me, Japan, apart from the US, Japan is like, if you can make it Japan,
Mm-hmm.
they are so good, so proficient in anything they do, like patchwork. That if you can teach them something, it's a lot, a lot. So I don't know if it's something to do with culture, with I don't know, but I see them a bit. How do I say? It is hard. It is hard to get into that market. So maybe in 20 years.
Oh, I think it'll be sooner than that. In all of our conversation, Cristina, today, is there any question I didn't ask you that you wish I had?
No, no.
Well, you have shared so much wonderful knowledge and so many of your beautiful stories with us. If any of our listeners would like to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I will send you my Instagram account name on Facebook as well as my web page, because if I have to say my web page, which is www.chrisartbono.com, people won't be able to type it.
And we'll include that on the show notes, and that'll be on our website too.
Yeah. So well, if people if people look for Cristina Arcenegui Bono on Google, they will find my my website. But they can also see my work, as I said, on Facebook and Instagram, and also if they are members of the Quilt Show, they can watch my my episode on the Quilt Show.
That sounds wonderful. Cristina, this has been just so much fun today. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you very much, Meg. It has been a great pleasure and an honor.
Well, there you have it. Another story about someone just like you, someone for whom sewing and quilting is so much more than a hobby. It's a way of life and a connection to something much bigger. If you know someone you think has an outstanding story, a story that should be shared on this podcast, please drop me a note to meg@soandsopodcast.com or complete the form on our website. Be sure to subscribe to, review, and rate this podcast on your favorite platform, and visit our website, soandsopodcast.com, for information about today's and all of our guests. That's SEWANDSO podcast.com. And finally, I want to thank Bernina for making this program possible. I'm Meg Goodman, and I look forward to you joining us next time on So and So.